don't know who struggled with this here, but it took me so long I just felt so responsible for like the whole community that people saw me a part of, whether it was everybody in a wheelchair or everybody who had spina bifida, people knew that I had spina bifida. And so if somebody, asked me a question, whether they were, overtly, sugarcoating it or being like really blunt about it, I felt so responsible. And I just couldn't bear the idea that if I was, God forbid, having a bad day, and then somebody, either, wanted to ask but didn't want to seem like, I'm actually putting myself out there,
but
wanting to know. Yeah, so exactly. I might not want to answer it. And normally I love talking. I love communicating, and I love, giving people a new perspective. So I take the ambassador role that I feel I have, whether it's been given to me or whether I'm wrong about that, very seriously. And it took me so long to not feel like I've literally done everybody a disservice who's in a wheelchair because I snapped at a person. And it's just like, now that person's never going to feel comfortable asking a question again, and then it like goes back in time because now they don't want to be educated. And that was a lot of pressure for me. So how do you guys deal with questions or asking the questions? Like, when do you guys feel comfortable asking the questions?
Sure.
Like,
I know for myself, it's going to come down to a day-by-day thing. Like we said earlier, it depends on when you catch someone in the moment. Maybe you don't feel like it in that moment. But I do take responsibility for the fact that I believe we have to diminish a shushing culture, is what I like to call it, as of the parents who shush their children who are saying, "Mommy, what's wrong with that man? Why is he using this?" And then I see those parents going, "Shh," but it's only because their parents shushed them. And I think that it has to stop at some point. So when I was younger, I wouldn't entertain that because I was young and maybe I was frustrated about having a disability, so maybe I wouldn't. As an adult now, I take responsibility in the fact that I'll take 2 seconds to stop and say, "Excuse me, ma'am, no, it's okay for your child to ask this question. I have cerebral palsy, but essentially what that means is I use my wheelchair because it helps me get around faster than you, as I'm not able to walk the same way that you are." I'm not going to get into all the medical things. This might be a young child, 3 to 4 years old. They're not going to understand any of that. But children are the most forgiving as well as the most curious.
Yeah.
And so when you explain to them in as basic terms as you can, most of the time they'll just be like, "Okay, thanks.
That's all I wanted, yeah.
Thank you." And then you see the look of shock on the parent's face because they're like, "Wow, I didn't realize it was that easy to explain it." Well, it is, but it's going to be up to us because each person is going to react differently in these situations. The thing that might shock you, and I've had this happen more than once, which shocks my wife all the time, is that I've had a number of occasions. I'll give you the most recent. I was wheeling through the mall, and I had my earbuds in, and I see this gentleman walking, and he looks kind of like, he may be part of my brethren, meaning he's got cerebral palsy. And so he kind of stops me as I'm wheeling, and he goes, "Excuse me," I'm taking my earbud out. He says, "Do you mind if I ask you a question?" I said, "Sure." He's like, "Do you mind if I ask you how you got to be in a wheelchair?" I said, "No, not at all. I have cerebral palsy." And of course, his next answer was, "Oh, me too." I said, "Don't worry, man, I can tell. There's a certain swagger that we all have, right?" But the next thing that he said, which is not the first time this has happened to me, but he stopped and he said, "Do you mind if I pray for you?" And
I've gotten that.
And I was actually just shocked because he's a guy with CP. And I've had this before, so I had sort of prepped my mind the next time that this happens, thinking that it wouldn't happen again, but sure enough it did. I'm going to have a different answer. Previously to this, my answers were, "You know what, sure, if that makes you feel great, then by all means, let's do it." And then we go into this thing for like 10 seconds where they're praying for me. But this time I had enough. Because it's not the first, it's about the 4th time I've been asked that in the last 6 months. And so I told him, "No, I'm good." And he was shocked by my answer, and he goes, "Well, what do you mean you're good?" I said, "Well, I'm good. I don't feel like I need prayer because I'm happy with who I am, and I'm happy with the world that I live in." And he goes, "Yeah, but don't you know that cerebral palsy is not natural? It's not part of God's creation." Which I was even more stunned because of the fact that this guy is somebody with cerebral palsy. So I said to him, "Okay, let's talk about this for 2 seconds. So you're saying CP isn't natural. Okay. Yes, that's right. Well, but you're saying that God created all. Is that correct? Well, yes, he did. So did God create all creatures? Well, yes, he did. And am I not then a child of God if that's your context or that's what you believe? Well, absolutely. Well, then if God is all-seeing and all-powerful and he created us all, and I wasn't his intention, then why were we created to begin with, right? And then he was just kind of shocked and didn't really know how to respond. And I said, and that's exactly my point. You know, I'm happy with who I am. This is the way that my life was meant to be. And it's because of that that a certain sequence of events have happened to lead you to meet me today, to be the person that I am today. And because of that, I'm good, but all the best to you. And then I just kind of moved on with myself. But you know, part of me wanted to go back because of that human element after I was wheeling away and find him in the mall again and say, I gotta ask you though, how much has that prayer helped you as far as eradicating your cerebral palsy? Because I find it ironic that he does clearly go around and do this, can I pray for you, for multiple people, but if that's what he truly believes, he's probably done it for himself. And then my question is, well, has it made your disability lesser or more or nothing at all? And in which case, why would you continue that pursuit? But again, that's getting into religion and all these things. So, you know,
Other panel discussion.
for a long time on that.
But I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah. So you know, I think that what is really important to get out of to ask or not to ask, that is the question. I think that we all have to realize that, you know, it's human nature to want to learn. You know, and unfortunately, we can't learn everything through Google. Or is that fortunately? Depends on the day, too.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
Fortunately or unfortunately, we can't do everything through Google. So I think that, you know, in terms of me, if somebody is just trying to get a rise out of me, and I'd like to think that I've figured out, I have my own personal barometer, and I might be wrong, you know, when it does happen. Sometimes people just want to get a rise out of me, right? And sometimes they're on, like, they want to learn, but they don't want to be vulnerable, you know, in doing that. So they might have a little bit of an attitude towards it. So on those days, I'll be like, okay, I will take a couple minutes just to, you know, clear this up, right? And then, you know, either they'll take it or they won't. And then, you know, there are those days where they really want to know, and they're really trying to understand the world around them, and they have the great intentions. And in those days, I literally stop in like monsoon weather because I really appreciate it when you can tell those good intentions, right? So, but I think that we all have to remember when asking any question of anybody, we're all going to have our good and bad days. So just because we have one bad experience doesn't mean we should stop asking questions or stop answering questions. It just depends on the day. So if you have a bad reaction, might have been a bad day for that person, you know?
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot, the idea of sort of being forced into an ambassador sort of position as an acquired injury, because it was something that I was suddenly introduced into, that I'd been living my life, nobody ever asked me anything, and suddenly I was just being asked tons of questions. And I have to admit, at first it was really difficult, more or less because it was just difficult for me to work through it myself, like just try to understand and comprehend the massive change that happened in my life. And I've also had, you know, times where I ended up with an experience like being invisibly injured, and I'm able to walk. So I've used handicap parking spots or accessible parking spots.
That's totally
There
fine.
you go.
Again, I'm not offended because it's the intention, right?
It makes you think now, right?
Yeah. So I use those spots. I try not to use them as when I don't absolutely have to, because I know that the space requirements for people with chairs is different. Yeah. But sometimes I do need to use. I don't have a lot of energy. I need to get in and out. And I had somebody once actually like look at me and be like, you're not disabled, what are you doing in that parking spot? And this was fairly soon after my accident, and I ended up crying, and it was just really upsetting and really, you know, hurtful. And I was like, this isn't fair. I shouldn't have to explain myself to strangers. But now that some time has passed, and I think I've got a better understanding of it, and I feel like I'm better able to communicate with people and these things. So, but for me, it's questions I love. If somebody's going to ask me something, I am 99.9% of the time going to be appreciative and responsive, unless I'm really having a bad day, which is fine as well, because we all do. We're all people. But I'm more likely to just say, I'm sorry. I'm having a don't have to say anything. I don't really feel like talking right now. I apologize.
Mhm.
I gotta go.
Mhm.
And that has happened. They're like,
Yeah.
okay.
And these people who are confronting Christina, they're there for people with disabilities, right? They're there.
That's the ironic part. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry?
That's the ironic part.
Yes, yeah, they're there to make sure that those spots are available, and it's tough because
It's
you fall
difficult
through
to
the
tell.
cracks, right?
Yeah.
So that's exactly it that I want to say. I appreciate that you're advocating for people with disabilities, but you gotta be a little bit more cautious because you don't necessarily know.
Yeah.
Maybe ask the question next time.
Yeah.
If you're really concerned, like, do you have the placard? Are you legally entitled to this spot?
Can you show some certification?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and just be cautious about it. Just think it through a little bit and try. Like anyone who's ever attacked me, that's been the worst.
Yeah.
I was traveling to the States once a little while ago, and I was stubborn and I wasn't asking for any help, so I hadn't told anyone that I had a disability because I could do it on my own. And the airports are massive.
Yes.
And I was fatiguing out fast, like I was going downhill. And I had actually had a backpack on, and I got to, I guess it was the customs line. I can't even remember what line it was, but it was huge. And I was like, I can't. There's no opportunity for me to sit at any point in here. I just can't do this. So I went to the accessible spot that had no line, and the guy was like, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, well, I have a spinal cord injury. I can't handle the lineup. It's too difficult trying to explain myself. He's like, "You're not disabled."
Oh
And
boy.
I so badly wanted to ream this guy out. Like, I wanted to rip him some new holes. But he was also in between me and my flight. So I was like, you might be able to stop me entering your country. So, look, I have ID. Could you please? And he was like, "You're wearing a backpack. You're not disabled." And I was like, "Oh, are you kidding me? Because that's the defining factor? Really? That's where you're coming at me from?" Anyway, then the next guy over, he actually looks over and he yells quite loudly, "What's she doing in that lineup?" And by this point, everybody is looking at me. And I know that a lot of people in this lineup are going to be like, "Whoa, what a bitch. This young girl is just like trying to totally take advantage and just like get in front of us." And I'm just like wanting so badly to just curl up into this tiny little ball. And I was just like, "But please, I have ID." Like, I'm not making this up. And I'm like, "Can I show you my ID?" And he's like, "No, it's fine." And he processes me through. And then I kind of limp past, and the other guy goes, "Oh." Just like, and I.
Oh, as in like they realize, or
Yeah.
oh, as in like she's faking it.
No, she's clearly got an injury going on here, and mind you, that's the only visible part is my limp. Never mind the pain, the fatigue. There's layers underneath that they have no clue about. So anyway, I walk in and I was just crushed. I sat down. I bawled my eyes out for a good 5 minutes because that sucked. And I really didn't feel like I could advocate for myself properly because of the situation, and I didn't want them to stop me from my flight.
Yeah.
But then that's where the positive attitude comes in. I cried. I got it out. I forgave myself for crying, and then I got up and got on my flight.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's people who attack me. Those are the ones that I take issue with.
Yeah.
People who ask me questions, as long as you're polite about it, ask away. I'm totally down for it, and if I'm not, I'll tell you.
There you go.